have a presentation next that is on what can Vietnam cashew industry offer to the rest of the world. I would invite Mr. Ashok Narayanan.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Shivalsa, for a very kind introduction to me and to my company. Vietnam, interesting country, interesting people, very interesting for the cashew world, as it were, for the last 20 years in terms of kernels. They have been involved in the honor business since the early to mid 80s as well. I'm not using any charts, graphs, and tools like that because there's been only one way the business in Vietnam has gone, which is up, and up. The progression has been geometric in many ways. The number of Vinakas members, which is the association in Vietnam, not exclusively for processors or exporters, also local bodies, government, farmers, etc. was 22 founding members in 1990. It now stands at over 500. There were 250 in 2010, or 200 in 2010. So the growth in the last 5 years has been over 100%. The number of exporters in the 90s were a handful. In the late 90s, early 2000s, after they started to get involved majorly in processing and exports, were in the region of 50 to 70. In 2010, there were 150 exporters, and today there are 325 exporters registered with Vinakas. What this tells us is that this origin has become a very important part of the cashew business over the last 20 years, both as a source for kernels to the world buying markets and as a source or as a destination for imported raw cashew nuts. Well, what does Vietnam offer the world cashew business? Promises and problems, opportunities and obstacles, much success and huge headaches. If I were not to mention the fact that, like all businesses, this is also rife with enormous problems that most people who participated in this hall would attest to, either with shipment problems, quality problems, payment problems, any number of problems. But the fact that the number of participants in this business has quadrupled, quintupled, gone up in dramatic proportions from all over the world, including from India, is testimony to the fact that it is still the land of opportunity as far as cashews is concerned. And now white-haired, undyed, is testimony to the fact that the problems still exist, despite everybody's best efforts. What we see as the opportunities are the fact that the industry there has been adaptable in terms of, for example, mechanization. They were one of the first to get into just flexible packaging, much before the Indian industry was able to absorb the fact that it was a requisite part of buyers' requirements. I remember a time when flexi packs used to be at a premium for shipments from India. The moment the Vietnamese started to implement flexi packs as a common packaging system, we are now at a discount, with tin packing being at a premium. This country is again being one of the leading, they've been a leader in absorbing mechanization in processing. They are also one of the few countries who have set up these industries that produce manufacturing facilities for the cashew business. All of this tells us one thing: this country is here to stay. They've been an important part of the cashew business before they became processors. I mean, they were important exporter of raw material to India. And today, at 305,000 tons, they are the largest exporter in the world today. Part of the fact, of course, is that India has got such a huge domestic consumption that the exports have relatively stagnated over the last 5 to 10 years. But it doesn't take away from the fact that Vietnam has started to import the volumes it does. I mean, this year was 800,000 tons, as Mr. Tan said in his message to us. That's 60% over 2013. And that kind of growth is enormous. Again, growth like this comes with attendant problems. So the challenges are going to be, well, finance is one of them. I heard a lot of the African panelists talking about how they can handle the finance problems into Vietnam. I think there's a role for companies of responsibility to play. There's a role for government and quasi-government organizations to play. I think, well, I was mentioned that talking about banks and Vienna's involvement with the ministry and the government to lend assistance to the importers. In the last 3 years, after the problems that the industry went through with very wild price fluctuations in 2010-11, the banks have tightened up considerably. One of the reasons the market pricing has been so affected by the domestic crop and consequently the prices for imports in Vietnam has been the fact that the banks have become far stricter than they would be, let's say, 10 years ago. So whilst they are supporting the industry, the big losses and bad debts that accrue in the 2010-11 period and prior to that, in 2006 and 7, have made them very cautious. So there's a mechanism that origin shippers from Africa, origin organizations from Africa can in some way mitigate these risks that the destination banks have to take. I think it will happen. The import figures in Vietnam speak for themselves. They were under 100,000 tons in 2001, under 300,000 tons in 2005, under 300,000 tons in 2012, and at 300,000 tons today. And from the experience that we've had, it looks like they're set to grow. The main challenge that both buyers of kernels and suppliers of products face in Vietnam is the extreme diversity of participants in the market. It used to be a market where there were a handful of large companies which were doing about 50, 60, 70% of the business, both in terms of kernel exports and in terms of raw imports. That has changed now. I mean, the number of participants in a 300 plus exporter community, the number of 3 to 5 container a month shippers is about 25%, which tells you that, and these are small shippers that are probably very cheap in price, but then the quality suffers. And because the quality suffers, they're cheap. How does a buyer mitigate these risks? Similarly, how does a raw trader who's selling to these small factories, how does he mitigate the risk of non-payment, non-performance, and other related issues? I think there is a role for traders out of Singapore and other parts of the world. A role for brokers, responsible brokers who are involved with the trade from Vietnam and kernels and into Vietnam and raw nuts. I think that's what the opportunity is for these intermediaries. I will actually not say too much more and leave the floor open for questions. This is about the last presentation before lunch. Normally the hardest one to hold attention. A little less than the person speaking just after lunch, because then people are falling asleep. So I will now conclude by saying that we are very supportive of Affordable Business Solution, CashInFoline.com's initiative. This is a platform that I think was long overdue in coming. There has been no global platform for specifically the cashew industry, be it raw nuts, processing, kernel trading, brokerage, whatever it is. And I think this initiative ought to be supported to the fullest extent by all participants in this business. I think over the next few years, this could become a very important forum, an important platform where ideas can be exchanged, opinions brought forth, problems discussed openly, not just the nice things, I mean, just politically correct things, but things that are not always the pleasantest of things to talk about. We should talk about those, find answers to them, and make this forum and make this business a healthy and a very beneficial one for all of us. Thank you.
Any questions that you have on Vietnam? Yeah. Hello. Yes, Mr. Narayanan. My question: what is the economic size of a processing unit in Vietnam? You said there are 350 players. Is there an economic size for the industry?
The 350 number I mentioned are exporters. There are over 1,000 factories in just one province called Big Four, which is the primary cashew area in Vietnam. So the answer is no. There are factories that are processing, I think, 3 bags, 5 bags, 10 bags, and there is a big business which a lot of trading companies are involved in. The exporters themselves are also traders of kernels from these small factories. They buy the kernels, they regrade them and export them along with their own production. And in some cases, as buyers will agree, they re-export them without regrading them, which is a big problem, of course.
You're not talking about the repackers and only the graders and repackers. You're talking about the shellers
Yeah.
who are mechanized. There's mechanization, there has to be investment.
Yeah, they make the investments. I mean, with all due respect to my friend Stefano Masani and Ratamare, the guys in Vietnam who produce these machines, and one of them is here, Kaufat, and there are others who've started doing this. They have very competitively priced machinery. So that makes it easy for small units to, like I said, process very small quantities and turn their production around very quickly.
That means the entry barriers have disappeared in the last 4 years.
They're reducing, like in all businesses, entry barriers are reducing. The entry barriers, I think, remain with the people from overseas dealing with Vietnam. The entry barriers remain the challenges of performance, challenges of integrity. Those remain, and those are the challenges to overcome. And that barrier is for the international community more than it is for the local people.
Thank you.
Mr. Ashok, we understand that Vietnam is having a perfect trade agreement with China. Could you have an idea about the volume of trade between Vietnam and China in terms of cashew kernels?
The export of cashews from Vietnam to 305,000 tons of kernels includes about 60,000 tons, in my understanding, to China. Does that answer your question?
Mr. Ashok, really, I'm very much thankful to you for your short, beautiful idea about Vietnam. One thing that comes to my mind, though Vietnam came to this industry too late in comparison to India, how it attained so short of this automation and R&D, all these things? Is it any government support, due to some government support, or the market demand, or by the interest of the machine manufacturers?
I think I'll start with the last point first. The machine manufacturers are a very late entrant into this scenario. Vietnam started to become a factor much before mechanization was a factor. I think it's to a large extent to do with the attitude of people, the work ethic. They are very hardworking people. To give that is very industrious, they're very hardworking people. The government is very supportive. I think they've done this to not just cashews. If you look at the pepper business, you look at the coffee business, you look at anything else that they've been involved with, they are now a serious competitor to China for outsourcing of manufacturing. There's Nike, there's Adidas, there's Levi's, there's all kinds of people who are now using Vietnam as an alternative to China because Vietnam is cheaper, they're as hardworking or even harder working. And I think it's a mindset that has brought them to where they are. The other thing is that why do they adapt so quickly? You know, this is something that is it's human nature. I mean, you see, when they start late, when it's like India with mobile telephones, the US was the first country in the world, and Japan were the early entrants into mobile telephony. But they took a long time to switch to GSM from their old systems, the CDMA system, because change is harder than implementing something new. If I didn't have anything at all, I buy the latest and I put it into place. If I already have an existing system, then for me to undo it and to undo the thinking, to undo the existing processes, takes a lot more effort. It takes longer than just to use something new. So they came to the field of processing in the mid-90s, and in the late 90s, so FlexiPacks, I use that as an example, they were doing they still do tents to China, but they, you know, when buyers in Europe and Australia said we need FlexiPacks, the new guys who started a factory bought FlexiPack machines, they didn't even bother with tents anymore. So it's the timing. I mean, they came to the business at a point where they could implement changes that were already happening in the industry, so that gave them an edge, I think. So it's a combination of different things. But I think it's the attitude, it's partly government support, and partly the good fortune of the country, where astrology must have been good when they got into the business.
Thank you so much, and I think I need to stop here because the time is paid. Thank you. Good presentation.